The information shared on the Allo Podcast is not intended as medical advice. Your medical care decisions should be made in consultation with your physician who is familiar with your specific case.
Hi, welcome to the Allo Podcast from the Allo Hope Foundation. I'm Bethany Weathersby. Wait, I gotta do that again. What's this?
So good.
No, what's happening here?
I'm Bethany. I feel like we're on like the big comfy couch or something. And Nicola, hello.
That was so weird. I was like,
good morning.
Did you ever do King of the Hill or King of No? That's
a
just,
power
but I
pose.
love King of the Hill.
Oh, that's it. No, I was thinking
really
of
good.
King of the Castle.
Hey.
No.
I'm the King of the Castle. You're the Dirty Rascal. You never did
Wow,
that?
no. But I do want to go watch some King of the Hill tonight now.
Okay, sorry. Let's just keep going. Let's keep that exciting intro.
All
that
right.
confusing intro.
Keep the exciting one, and let's try and tell it like one that somebody can actually understand next. Just kidding.
What is happening?
Actually, it was totally fine. It was just
Are you
her
okay?
pose that was hilarious. It's so good. Let's go.
All right. Are we redoing or are we just continuing?
I don't know. Let's redo.
Okay. And
But
then
maybe
we'll let...
we'll have both go because both were great.
Okay.
The
All
second
right,
one hasn't
starting
happened
again.
yet, but okay.
Completely professional in here. Everything's professional.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi.
Okay.
I can't. Okay. This is real. All right. Hi. Welcome to the Allo Podcast from the Allo Hope Foundation. I'm Bethany Weathersby.
And I'm Molly Sherwood. And today's episode is kind of a big deal. Feels a little historic. We are talking about something that for years felt like more of a distant dream than a possibility.
So true. And actually, guys, it's so historic that this is the second time we are recording this episode.
It sure is. And you know how much we love having to re-record a whole episode and coordinating childcare for 8 children to create absolute silence for a prolonged period of time. And some of us have to move to our mom's house with better internet because some of us only have horses for neighbors.
Live on a horse farm in wild Kentucky.
That's what happens.
Yeah. So yeah, the first time we did it, we got way too in depth. And this is a very full, very exciting episode. Mm-hmm. And we realized we've got to pare it down, so that's what we've done. It's going to be great. We're so excited.
It's going to be funny when our listeners are like, wow, this is the pared down one. They're going to be like, I shudder. I shudder at the thought of what it once was. Anyway.
Oh,
okay.
Man.
Historic moment part 2.
It does feel historic, though, and actually kind of personal at the same time, because for over a decade now, we have watched families fall through the same heartbreaking gaps in their care again and again. And it's not because HDFN is not treatable, right? It's survivable. And this is happening because the right care either wasn't provided or wasn't provided in time. And as I think most of our listeners probably know by now, my own daughter, Lucy, died from HDFN. Her death was more than likely preventable. And so many other families have experienced a preventable loss caused by HDFN, just like we have.
That is what makes this moment so much more powerful than what it may seem on paper or in publications, because we finally have a unified set of evidence-based, expert-backed, patient-informed guidelines for the prevention and management of HDFN. Yes. I feel like I need a sound. Ooh,
oh my gosh.
Oh, I love that, Eric.
So
Thank you.
good.
Thank you so much. Yes, we did need that.
It's perfect.
Chef's kiss. Love it.
Just take the moment in. Thank you. This is so great.
This is a loud applause. This is a really long class.
It's a very ongoing applause.
It's appropriate. Well, it's getting a little long now, actually.
Yeah,
but
I think we're supposed to.
Anyway,
Anyway,
go on.
Yes, but that cheering, that applause, that is how we feel about
Yeah.
this topic today, because we believe that these new care guidelines have the power to reshape the future for alloimmunized families and can actually help patients avoid the tragedies that we see and experience ourselves far too often.
And so today we're going to cover the new evidence-based guidelines for HDFN, why they were needed, how they were created, what the guidelines actually are, and what this means for those affected by this condition. And just a quick kind of heads up for our listeners, if you are a regular and you already know a ton about HDFN, this episode is going to just be like a nice little treat, just lovely little brain candy. It is so chock full of juicy stuff that really pulls together things and themes that we've built on over previous seasons. But if you're just starting out and learning about HDFN, you might prefer to go back to some of the episodes in season 1 as a primer before diving in. But hey, I'm not about to tell somebody how to spend their personal special podcast listening time. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for that Nerd Town travel advisory, Molly. I fully accept the invitation. So
Excellent.
let's get started and look at what do we mean when we say care gaps. We actually say that a lot, often in our social media, in our conversations, in our podcasting, etc. And so exactly what do we mean when we are saying care gaps? Well, throughout seasons 1, 2, and 3 of the Allo Podcast, we highlight reoccurring gaps in care that allo moms and their HDFN babies run into. And a lot of times it's just, an interview with another allo mom. And I would say almost every story has an example of one of these common care gaps that we see patients falling through. And so sometimes it feels like we're kind of sharing the same story over and over again. The families didn't receive the care they needed when they needed it. And that's what we mean by a care gap. And of course, for HDFN, we know, unfortunately, that those gaps can be fatal. So I actually looked up the official definition of gaps in care, and most definitions say something like the discrepancy between the care that patients receive and the best practices known to improve outcomes. But then that raises a tough question. What if there aren't even clear evidence-based best practices in place yet?
That really is the problem. We do have a little bit, and I'll talk about what we do have available to us prior to the development of these, but they kind of incompletely address the management for HDFN, and it's sort of sequestered across different specialties, and that lack of clarity does cost lives. And if we had more prescriptive care pathways, firm monitoring guidelines, and specific recommendations for how and when to intervene in an HDFN pregnancy and after birth, things would certainly look a lot different.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. I think right now, far too often, the quality of care depends on whether your doctor happens to be familiar with this rare disease, HDFN, or whether a kind of desperate mom stumbles across the Allo Hope, and that's not how life-saving care should work. So I think before we get into the actual guidelines themselves, I want to just highlight some of the most common gaps that we see in our daily work at the Allo Hope Foundation, and many of us have experienced in our own pregnancies. Okay, so delays in diagnosis, confusion around blood tests like titers, fetal antigen testing, paternal antigen testing, etc., missed opportunities to give ROGAM or start IVIG on time, delayed or absent monitoring for fetal anemia, unclear guidance on intrauterine transfusions, when to do them, how to time them, and when to do the last transfusion, delivery timing confusion, and then, of course, after birth, we see similar gaps around blood testing, timing of monitoring, and then the urgency of treatment, timely treatment. And of course, there's confusion surrounding, when is a baby cleared from HDFN? Mm-hmm. It's a lot.
And babies are still dying when their outcomes could have been different if their care team had known, for example, that it's possible to start monitoring with special MCA Doppler ultrasounds as soon as 15 or 16 weeks. Most providers aren't naturally going to know that information if it's not stated in any guidelines. You know, if they had known that intrauterine transfusion should happen before a baby is visibly very, very sick and hydropic, or if they had known that after birth or after discharge, babies need weekly labs to check for delayed onset anemia. But how could they possibly know this when it's not in any guidelines? So we have to take a comprehensive approach to this and enable the providers to access the best resources and guidelines possible for this very treatable disease, and empower the patients to have access to that same information too.
That is so well said, Molly. Totally agree. And actually, yesterday, Molly just said to me, what if we start by briefly going over the current guidelines for management of HDFN during pregnancy and post-birth, just to see what we're building on? And I thought that was such a good idea because we have lived this, right? We know that there are gaps, but let's look at it officially. What is there currently to guide care for HDFN?
Okay, yes, good idea. I think it'll help kind of position it well, because a lot of times people do ask, well, aren't there already guidelines? And there are some resources that people have been using to manage and lean on. So the closest thing we have to HDFN guidelines in the US is two things. One is the ACOG Practice Bulletin on Management of Alloimmunized Pregnancy, and ACOG is the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. The other one is a pediatric guideline put out by the American Academy of Pediatrics for the management of high bilirubin in newborns born after 35 weeks. That covers not just HDFN. HDFN is a cause of high bilirubin, so that's described in there, but it covers other reasons for high bilirubin too. But going back to the ACOG practice bulletin, just to sort of paint the picture, and it's accessible to the patients in our support group. We have it as a resource. It is 6 pages long. 2 of those pages are dedicated to kind of describing the antibodies and what the disease is. 1 page is a table that lists the antibodies that could cause HDFN. And the remaining 3 pages are sort of their clinical recommendations. And they give some good context for, you know, doing middle cerebral artery, MCA Doppler assessments and things like that. But in the end, they end with 5 recommendations. And so I'm just going to tell you what those 5 recommendations are. One is they recommend using MCA Dopplers. In the recommendations, it does not specify when and how often. They recommend determining the father's antigen status. They recommend serial titers. Also, in the recommendation, does not say how often. They say that titers are not appropriate for monitoring KEL pregnancies.
Okay.
And the last one they say is that RhoGAM or Rh immune globulin is not indicated if somebody already has anti-D antibodies. So
True.
That is true.
Yeah.
So those are technically the 5 existing recommendations available in the U.S. for managing HDFN.
That would, just thinking from a physician's viewpoint, that would be so hard to manage this type of pregnancy with so few guiding, recommendations, I think.
I would imagine so. And I think it answers a lot of questions we all wonder about certain variations that we see in practice too.
True.
And, the neonatal guidelines for management of high bilirubin are very detailed, and they cover the high bilirubin for all causes, like I said. So HDFN is one of those causes. It has a nice management algorithm that's super detailed, which is great.
Yeah.
But obviously that's just for high bilirubin, not for anemia. Nothing, of course, about after discharge monitoring for HDFN, nothing about the cord blood testing that's needed to diagnose and screen and assess HDFN severity at birth. So it's a great piece, but it's not the whole puzzle.
Right. Wow. I kind of have no words.
rare for us. For both of us. So anyway, the picture is painted for why between what we see, what's available there, and what we've heard for the last 3 seasons about the patient experience and how that manifests in reality. Now we know why these guidelines were really, really needed.
Right. Wow. Okay. And so, yes, starting from there, these guidelines really clarify like the next step on the care pathway for your provider and for the patients to kind of know what to expect. And the guidelines are concrete. This feels so safe to me, just kind of describing them. Concrete, evidence-based recommendations backed by data, backed by clinical experience, and for the first time, the voices of patients and families who've lived through HDFN contributed to the creation of these.
And that's what makes this process so powerful and meaningful and unique. But hopefully it won't be unique for long. I hope this is the standard for creating new guidelines.
That'd be great.
And we'll talk more about how they were created in a little bit. So let's just dive into them because they are the main event and there are a lot. So they are designed to be the go-to evidence-based roadmap for managing alloimmunization in HDFN. I also just want to say that we could read these word for word, but I think it would be quite boring, as we found out the first time we tried to do this. So we're just going to explain the essence of what the recommendation is. But for anybody who's going to apply this to their own pregnancies or into their practice, you'd want to refer to the publications that are coming out in this and see exactly how it was worded. So there's extensive practice points in the supplementary content of the publications that cover all the bases that many listeners might still be wondering about, like, oh, are you going to talk about plasmapheresis? And are you going to talk about, steroids lowering MCA values? Those are all covered in the supplementary content for practice points.
Mm-hmm. And we will have a link to those as soon as they're available, right, Molly? In the show notes.
Hopefully they'll be available by the time this releases.
Yes.
But if not, the moment it's available, it'll be in the show notes.
It'll be there. So the guidelines are broken into 4 disciplines, actually: trauma, hematology, maternal fetal medicine, and neonatology. They kind of cover all the bases.
Mm-hmm. And to quickly explain why there are 4 disciplines involved without diving in too far, but we don't usually talk about trauma and hematology. So we'll just touch on that really quick. The trauma component essentially covers emergency transfusion practices for females who could one day become pregnant, which is important for our disease because some women can develop antibodies from a blood transfusion. So this is sort of on the prevention side. And then the hematology piece is tackling how to follow up and screen women who receive blood transfusions to see if they've developed antibodies. Then moving into the maternal fetal medicine piece, that's sort of like the bread and butter of what we always talk about, managing pregnancies once antibodies are detected. And then to see it all the way through, the final piece is the neonatal management of HDFN.
Yes. And then today, for this episode, we are just going to focus mostly on the maternal fetal medicine and neonatal guidelines because that's where most of our listeners are living. And let's just start with the first one. Okay, so we're looking at the prenatal guidelines here. So the first one is cell-free fetal DNA testing. That's what it's about. They recommend the use of cell-free fetal DNA to determine fetal antigen status for anti-D, anti-K, anti-C, big C and little c, anti-big E, and then anti-FYA antibodies.
And that shouldn't be new to our listeners because we've been talking about that since season 1, but it has not made its way into standard practice in many clinics yet. Yeah.
And I think that far too many providers are still relying on amniocentesis for these pregnancies. And this is, as we know, invasive, expensive, and carries its own risks, including raising the mom's antibody titer potentially just from, the inserting the needle and the mixing of blood. And though those risks are very unlikely, it's still additional risks. And so cell-free fetal DNA is actually safer, it's non-invasive, It's very accurate and widely available, so that's very exciting.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. So let's do the next recommendation. It's a two-parter, and I actually think you should do it, Bethany, because it's been such an important part of your personal story.
Yes. Okay. This one I'm so excited about. So, number 2, IVIG recommendations, clarified and expanded. So this, the use of IVIG for severely affected pregnancies it's a very hot topic in the HDFN world, I have to say. And there's a lot of different opinions on it. And for years, IVIG has typically only been offered to women after they've already lost a baby to HDFN, or often it's not offered at all. And that was the case for me with my first sensitized pregnancy with my daughter Lucy. I even asked for IVIG during my pregnancy with Lucy because I had a 1024 titer for Kel, and I wasn't able to get those treatments, and then Lucy died, and it did not have to happen. So these new guidelines finally recognize that IVIG should not just be reserved for the very worst case post-loss scenarios, and they recommend the use of IVIG in several situations. Number 1, if you have a history of fetal anemia prior to 24 weeks in one of your previous pregnancies, a prior loss to HDFN, and then they also suggest using IVIG with anti-D titers at or above 512, or if you have anti-Kel titers at or above 64, regardless of your pregnancy history, even if it's your first affected pregnancy. And this is huge.
Huge.
Like, this is going to save so many lives. When we were discussing all of this, and we'll go into the methodology in a bit about how these came to be, but in the creation of these guidelines, often, just like it's happening right now, I see the names of these babies who could have survived if this had been in place. I know their names, and there's so many more that I don't know, but the names come to mind, and I think of the babies, and that is, it's really heavy, because for our babies, it's too late, and that's hard to process. But this guideline in place is going to prevent that from happening to so many other babies in the future. And it's just, it's a really big deal.
That's exactly why I wanted you to present that one, and you did it perfectly.
Thanks.
The next one is updating the critical titer for Kel pregnancies to 4. And this is an interesting one, and it's going to be a slight shift from what we've said in the past. And that's part of what looking at the evidence and talking to other experts looks like. It's looking at the reality and making a joint decision together. So there was a lot of discussion about what the critical titer for Kel pregnancies should be. Some people who have been following along with HDFN for a long time will remember a time when the critical titer was 4. And we used to have it in some of our resources. And then about 5 years ago, it shifted to just any titer being considered critical for Kel. So our resources changed to reflect that. And after looking at the available published literature and hearing from the committee members, it was decided to move the critical titer for Kel back to 4, with an exception for any pregnancy with a previously affected baby. And this was tricky because we personally probably would have preferred to keep the titer at any titer just for the sake of being extra careful. But the truth is the data didn't support that. It doesn't demonstrate that interventions are generally needed for a titer of less than 4 for Kel. And we want these guidelines to be protective and evidence-based. And so we agreed along with the committee that the critical titer for Kel should be 4.
Yes. And this just took me back to when I first received my diagnosis. That was 2013. So the critical titer for Kel then was 8. Do you remember that? Or was that before your time?
It was before my time, but as a HDFN history nerd, I do recall.
Yeah. So It's interesting that this one bounces around this much. You know, like the others. Well, anyway, I don't. I see. I'm talking
At least
too
we
much.
landed on something, you know?
Yeah.
Just glad to have something to lean on.
Yeah, the
All right,
consensus.
lay it
All
on
right.
us. Next
Okay,
one.
number 4, MCA scans beginning at 16 weeks and then weekly thereafter. Another
getting
one that
such
I'm
good ones.
so
It's so
excited
good.
about, you guys.
So good.
And I just, it's the babies again, the names, the many names, and sometimes they pile up, and again, it's heavy. It's really heavy to think about that, but that's what is driving us, and that's why we are putting these guidelines in place, is to prevent babies from falling through the cracks. And let me just tell you about this guideline. I haven't even gotten into it. I'm immediately getting emotional. These guidelines now recommend starting MCA Doppler scans at 16 weeks and then continuing weekly if the baby is or might be antigen positive. And of course, if the antibody titer is critical. And there's also a practice point that allows for MCA scans to start as early as 15 weeks in cases of severe disease.
Yeah, this is a big one because what's available now in the ACOG guidelines, like we said, they don't have a specific guideline statement on it, but they do mention that you can start around 18 weeks and scan every 1 to 2 weeks. And, you know, their actual recommendation statement simply says that they can be used. That's it. Many providers interpret that to mean that you cannot start earlier than 18 weeks, and even every 2 weeks of monitoring is fine. But we have seen over and over that babies can become very sick within a week's time. And you know what's so interesting about this is, again, when you look at what's really out there, Dr. Marie, who developed MCA scans, he too recommended weekly MCA scans in his own publications. And he's been testing the accuracy of MCA scans beginning at 15 and 16 weeks decades ago.
Wow.
So now the guidance finally matches what the data and clinical experience has shown for years.
Right.
Yay.
And you know what I also think of when we're going through these again? I think of the mothers, and I think of like the load that we carry in our advocacy. And if this is in place, I think this is going to greatly lighten that load so that we don't have to fight so hard to receive proactive care. This is very exciting for moms too.
Okay, the next one this is our 5th one, IUTs continuing through 35 weeks. The 5th one is important because we don't talk about this in great detail, but this is about pregnancies that require intrauterine transfusion. And the recommendation says to continue doing IUTs once necessary until 35 weeks of pregnancy, unless there are technical limitations to conducting the procedure safely. This is super important because some facilities will stop offering IUTs at 32 or 33 weeks and then switch to an early delivery instead. But studies, especially those from our friends in Leiden, who we love, show that babies who stay in utero longer do better. They have fewer issues and a shorter stay in the NICU, and they recover more quickly. So that's an important one.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that one. I think it's going to really help with the post-birth care and intervention. Okay, number 6, the last one for our prenatal guidelines. Delivery timing is clarified in this one, which is very exciting. They recommend delivery should occur between 37 and 38 weeks and 6 days gestation. So 37 plus 0 all the way up to 38 plus 6 weeks in any pregnancy with red cell antibodies known to cause HDFN, even with low titers. And I do want to clarify that unless you know that the baby is antigen negative, so if you already have confirmation that the baby's antigen negative, then this doesn't apply. But this actually builds on ACOG's previous guidance, but it clears up the confusion because a lot of people weren't sure if it meant it's only for pregnancies that needed IUTs or pregnancies with critical titers and so on. So if you have red cell antibodies, even if you have a titer below critical, the recommended time to deliver is 37 to 38 weeks.
Got it in writing. Now we know.
Got it in writing.
And if you've had IUTs during the pregnancy, obviously delivery timing is adjusted based on the last transfusion. But either way, it's not a guessing game.
Right. That's going to be so helpful. Okay, so we did it. Those are the major prenatal recommendations. And of course, we're always open to questions if anyone has questions about those. And so let's just move on along to the neonatal management. There are 7 formal recommendations here, plus 1 bonus practice point that we think is super important and it deserves its own spotlight. And so before we jump into the neonatal guidelines, we would like to say a huge thank you to Dr. Tim Barr. We love him. He led the neonatology subgroup, and you can also hear him on season 3 of the Allo Podcast. It's a great episode. And there were so many other neonatologists and pediatricians who participated in the creation of these guidelines. They were so wonderfully open to the patient's experiences and input, and we're just very grateful for their work.
Yeah, this part was really overdue. We had some guidelines in place before for the pregnancy management of HDFN, right? But for neonatal, we were kind of just stitching together what was in the bilirubin guidelines and then just looking at random publications and sort of the way that other hospital systems were doing this.
Like we mentioned earlier, we have those AAP bilirubin guidelines, but that's just one piece, right, of this whole postnatal puzzle. And I think these recommendations finally bring it all together.
And remember, any questions as you're listening, the full document has those practice points and a justification for each guideline. So that kind of rounds it all out. All right, the first one for neonatology is recommending delivery at a level 3 or level 4 NICU. Because we get a bunch of questions about where should I deliver? And this guideline says that fetuses at risk for HDFN should be delivered at a facility with a level 3 or level 4 NICU. So that means access to specialized neonatal care, blood bank support, the ability to intervene quickly, and do exchange transfusion if that were to ever be needed.
That's so good to have clarity on that, because I think a lot of us were kind of left in the dark before this and delivering in places that might not have been able to meet our baby's needs. And so, and also with HDFN, it's so hard to predict when there's going to be an urgent need, like we've seen many times. The second one is something we talk about a lot, but again, it wasn't actually stated anywhere firmly. It's about that immediate lab work at birth, and it says that babies born to alloimmunized mothers should have blood drawn from the umbilical cord or placenta right after delivery for those initial laboratory studies. And if that's not possible, labs should be drawn from the baby immediately after birth.
And that might seem really simple, but a lot of hospitals will have a default sort of management protocol of waiting until 12 to 24 hours after birth to check things like bilirubin. And that's totally fine for a baby that doesn't have HDFN, but that really conflicts when we're talking about HDFN management. So these babies really need early labs. They need the Coombs test, bilirubin, hemoglobin, and retic counts right away. So this helps confirm that diagnosis and start treatment quickly. Bang, there it is.
Love it. Let's keep going. We got 7.
Oh, it's me next. Cool. Okay, let's do this. Okay, the third one is using IVIG in newborns. So this is, it's not the same as giving IVIG to the mom during pregnancy. This guideline suggests that IVIG should not be routinely given to all HDFN babies. It can be considered if the baby is failing initial treatment with phototherapy for high bilirubin, meaning the phototherapy isn't really working, and the bilirubin is still rising super rapidly, and the baby looks like they're headed towards needing an exchange transfusion.
And there have been mixed results in studies about IVIG for the neonatal use, and some show a reduced need for exchange transfusion. Others don't really show that. So this guidance encourages providers to be thoughtful. use it when it may truly help avoid an exchange transfusion, but don't use it reflexively in every HDFN baby, which I think is very helpful guidance. Okay, moving on. Number 4. I'm very excited about this one. Iron supplementation. Oh man, this one deserves a moment.
We could maybe we'll just do a whole episode on it this season.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, everyone should go listen. That's the one where I do lots of jokes. We did a lot of jokes on that one.
So many jokes. Many more jokes than I was prepared for.
Yeah. Just preparing the listeners. Okay, so this iron supplementation guideline, I feel like we've been shouting this from the rooftops for years. Don't give iron to our HDFN babies unless you test first. So they suggest not providing routine iron supplementation during the first 4 postnatal months in term infants with HDFN unless there is laboratory evidence of iron deficiency, which would be a ferritin test, right?
Yeah, and many HDFN babies, especially those who had intrauterine transfusions, they are full of iron-rich donor blood. They have iron overload, not deficiency. So giving extra iron can sometimes run the risk of creating harm. So before giving supplemental iron, whether you've had an IUT or not, check the ferritin.
And go listen to our mini episode on iron. It's a really good one.
Yeah, if you just want to hear us be mad about iron a little bit more.
And hear some good jokes. If you want some jokes.
Come for the iron, stay for the jokes. Or is it or should it be the other way? I don't really know. Come for the jokes.
Come for the jokes, man.
Oh, man.
Oh, gosh. All right, let's keep going.
Next one. We get this question a lot, too. Man, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like all the questions are answered in one place.
Here we go.
Can you just imagine? Just imagine. All right, the 5th one. Breastfeeding is recommended. The next one is such a gift to new moms. It recommends that infants with HDFN should be allowed to breastfeed or receive expressed breast milk if that is what the mom wants to offer.
And there have been a few studies, small studies, showing that, yes, maternal antibodies can be found in breast milk. They don't appear to negatively affect recovery. And for so many moms, being able to breastfeed is a huge piece of bonding and healing after these really high-risk pregnancies and birth. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And practically speaking, frequent feeding, whether it's by breast or bottle, helps break down bilirubin faster. So it's good medically and emotionally. And the AIP guidelines for high bilirubin say that feeding 8 or more times a day really helps to break down and metabolize that bilirubin. So really the focus here is on frequent feeding, whether it be breast milk or formula.
Love it. Very good point. Number 6 is red blood cell transfusion thresholds. And this one is pretty nuanced. So here we go. So we're talking about when to transfuse for hemolytic anemia post-birth. And the guideline says to avoid routine red blood cell transfusions in term infants with HDFN if hemoglobin is 7 or higher, and if the baby is otherwise well and not needing any respiratory support.
Yeah, and that really matters because unnecessary transfusions can suppress the baby's own red cell production, which could make them more likely to need more transfusions later.
Right. And then this kind of gives providers a threshold to consider, but still leaves room for clinical judgment. And it's not like a hard cutoff, but it's a thoughtful guideline, I think, to help prevent overtreatment.
Yeah. And for anyone who might listen to that and say, well, then when should I transfuse? This sort of depends on the hospital and the baby's overall picture, but we do have a neonatal best practices resource that we can link to in the show notes that includes the thresholds that 2 trusted hospitals use for their HDFN babies.
Yeah. Those are good. They're very different. Isn't that interesting?
They are. They're a little bit different.
Yeah, the 2 different groups of thresholds.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Number 7, the use of ESAs, which is erythropoiesis stimulating agents. Sometimes we call them like erythropoietin or darbepoetin.
EPO.
That's right. EPO,
Yeah.
yes. So this is about ESAs. The guideline suggests using an ESA for babies with worsening anemia, especially if the goal is to reduce the number of red cell transfusions.
And these medications can help some babies recover more quickly, but they do require weekly injections for up to 8 weeks. And I'm not sure because we never used this, but they might be kind of expensive. I'm not sure. But it's definitely something to discuss with your provider. And some families, they might prefer to risk having more transfusions over injections, which is valid too. But at least this gives some guidance on this topic. And okay, anything? Did you want to say something? So I feel like I cut you off.
That's so funny. I was actually thinking about saying something inside of my brain, but I chose not to. And I didn't even think I indicated that I chose to
sensed
not
it.
say. You literally just like got a whiff of a thought that I was having over here.
Yeah. I want to know. What do you want to say?
I was just going to say, we have very few randomized clinical trials to lean on in HDFN world, and there does happen to be one on using ESAs, and it did show, on average, it decreased the need for top-up transfusion by 1 transfusion.
Yeah.
So that's why it's here, but it's just saying that, if the family would rather potentially need 1 more transfusion, more or less, than do the recurring injections, then that choice is there.
Yeah. And, we love giving patients all of their options and kind of letting them choose what to do next. Okay, so the honorable mention, the post-discharge monitoring. It's very honorable. It's very, very necessary. So this is actually a practice point, and I feel like it kind of rounds out the neonatal care picture really well. So this proposes outpatient surveillance or monitoring after hospital discharge for late anemia with weekly hemoglobin and reticulocyte count measurements during the first 6 weeks after birth, and then transitioning to less frequent monitoring as applicable through the first 3 months. Increasing or stable normal hemoglobin values on 2 consecutive measurements after birth are good indicators that HDFN has actually been resolved. And I do want to clarify there, we're saying increasing hemoglobin values for 2 weeks or more. So not like 2 days apart, but like a week apart. And then either that or normal, stable hemoglobin values for 2 consecutive measurements.
Yeah, let's pause on that for a second. That is a really important answer to a question we get all the time. When is my baby done? When is my baby done? How do I know they're done? So just to say that, to like emphasize that point again, normal hemoglobin values 2 consecutive times spaced 2 weeks apart after birth, after you have done 6 weeks of monitoring. And for babies with a history of intrauterine or postnatal transfusion, they might need to continue doing weekly monitoring up through 3 months of age if they're not meeting that criteria for clearance. And so we actually go into this in great detail also this season, talking about after baby is home. So definitely take a listen to that to learn more about sort of this concept of how we watch our babies after they're back home.
And this guidance is huge. So many families are sent home with no follow-up plan. And then we see, baby becomes anemic and kind of crashes around 4 or 5 weeks old. And then it's a scramble to try to get in for a transfusion. And so now we have this kind of standard in place, and it's very exciting.
Yes, we really needed that one for sure. I cannot wait for people to get their hands on these.
I know.
And you know what? After all that conversation, that's not even all of them. We talked briefly about the trauma and hematology guidelines that are related to the choice for the blood product for a woman who's experiencing traumatic hemorrhage, and then how we follow up with somebody after they've received a blood transfusion to observe whether or not they've developed antibodies. And that is super important, and that even has its own publication that's coming out And so I think what we're going to do is link to that as a resource. But for the sake of this extremely long and deeply intense episode, we won't go through those. And if somebody is upset about that, they're welcome to tell us. And then maybe if enough people want it, we'll just do another episode next season, specifically on the trauma and hematology guidelines.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Now that we have looked at what's in the guidelines, let's kind of shift over and talk about how the guidelines were created, because the process behind this was really unlike anything we've ever been a part of. Kind of hard to describe what it felt like, but let's go back to the beginning. How did we, me and you, Molly, Bethany and Molly, somehow end up co-chairing a national initiative to create medical guidelines for trauma and HDFN? How did this happen?
That is great. I'm really glad that we clarified that there actually was some like real methodology behind this, so people didn't think that we just invented these like in our bedrooms or something.
Like that 5
which
things
we would have
episode.
been happy to do. Yeah, exactly.
Remember the 5? We were supposed to do 5 and we did like 20.
Oh yeah, we just couldn't help ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we certainly owe that opportunity to be a part of this in this way to Dr. Phil Spinella, for sure.
Yes, we love Phil. Dr. Spinella is a pediatric critical care doctor, and he's an internationally recognized leader in trauma and transfusion medicine. He served in Iraq, where he was literally transfusing blood into wounded soldiers from his own arm like a boss. And I think that really changes that kind of experience, man.
Yeah.
It would really change who you are as a person and how you practice medicine.
So yes, it's understandable then that this is really his passion, is working on the best way to treat people who are traumatically bleeding. And so one of his biggest interests is improving survival during traumatic hemorrhage, especially figuring out what kind of blood to use and how to get it to the patient in the fastest, safest way, and how to offer it equitably to both men and women, given this consideration of the fact that women can develop red cell antibodies, which is consequential to them if they go on to become pregnant.
And that's actually where this unexpected connection between trauma and HDFN came in. So when females who have a negative blood type receive Rh positive blood during a trauma situation, when Rh negative blood is unavailable for a transfusion, they can become sensitized and develop anti-D antibodies that can go on to potentially cause harm in future pregnancies.
But instead of sort of keeping that consideration in the academic and clinical world, he reached out to us. He asked the moms who have actually experienced this condition what they thought about these practices. And from that first conversation came a big ripple effect that grew into this entire project. And he's really amplified our voice and allowed us many opportunities to share about our mission and the needs of this patient population, which is how this happened.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that one act of simply asking the patients, the people most affected, about all of this and to have a say, that really set the tone for everything that followed. And so we just so deeply appreciate Dr. Phil Spinella. Phil. Let me say it again.
Phil?
We, Dr. Phil. We just
He's
so
gonna love that.
Oh, okay. And we just so deeply appreciate Dr. Phil Spinella for all of this.
So each of the 4 guideline subgroups, like we talked about, trauma, hematology, maternal fetal medicine, and neonatology, had a patient at the table involved from the beginning, not in a sort of token role. A lot of times you hear, oh, this was patient-centered because we had a patient focus group one time for 1 hour. We were equal contributors. We reviewed the evidence. We debated the language. We shaped the recommendations side by side. We were co-leaders, not just observers.
Amazing. And the doctors, I believe there were 45 doctors in total. They were so incredibly generous and thoughtful, fully committed to doing this work. And it was a lot of work. It was very, just like this episode, it was very in-depth and time-consuming. And I wish that we could name all of the doctors, but we don't have time for that, unfortunately. Our listeners will probably recognize some familiar names. Which ones do you think they would know already, Molly?
They might know Dr. Ken Moise. He led the maternal, we might know him. He led the maternal fetal medicine subgroup. Dr. Tim Barr led neonatology. We know Dr. Kara Markham, Dr. Saul Snoweyes, Dr. Juan Gonzalez, Dr. Leo Pereira. These are clinicians we've talked about before on the podcast who deeply understand HDFN care. And we also have to mention Dr. Travis Polk, who was the director of the U.S. Army's Casualty Care Research Program. He heard us speak at a conference that Phil had invited us to speak at, and he, after listening, chose to allocate his research dollars toward this conference. This would not have happened without him. I still can't. How did that happen? And the trauma and hematology subgroup leaders, Dr. Mark Yazer, Dr. Christine Leeper, Dr. Jennifer Andrews, Dr. Cassandra Josephson. We can just list all the doctors in the show notes.
There's so many we're leaving out.
I know. We'll have to list them in the show notes too.
Yeah. But we're just so grateful for all of them.
And they had to, not only were they involved in this for months and months, but then they had to come together in person, and we were meeting in Maryland in November of last year, 2024. So for that conference where the discussions were had and the voting took place, if you want to understand the methodology details, they're all in the published manuscripts. But very briefly, we were able to design, and then through Johns Hopkins University, conduct systematic literature reviews to assess the current available evidence about all of these topics. And then each subgroup worked together to draft recommendations based on the evidence, patient preferences, ethical principles, and cost and access considerations. And then, like I said, we met in person to vote and agree on the recommendations.
And so when we met together, it was actually a 2-day conference. It was open to the public. And it's hard to explain what it felt like to be there. It was definitely the most unique conference I've ever attended or been a part of. And I really felt privileged to be included in something like that.
I felt really overwhelmed by that too. Yeah. And it's so incredible to see where our organization has come to be able to be a part of something so monumental in our disease. I think that sometimes patient advocacy organizations get this reputation that we only are talking to and sort of acting in a patient-only role. But patients can do this. This is what it also means. And I don't want to speak for you, Bethany, but I'll say for me personally, as my own human, I think the best thing I've ever done, other than caring for my own children, is in watching or contributing to the live birth of other children who struggled with HDFN. Nothing compares to watching a miracle like that unfold. I mean, I will never get tired of a mom sending me a picture of her baby 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes after they're born, taking the time to do that for us, Yeah. But if I ask myself about our biggest professional accomplishment so far, it would be this. And I think these guidelines will actually save so many more children beyond the number of lives that me and you can be a part of in our daily work, which is really what this needs to be. This needs to be something for everyone to access, not just people who stumble across a certain organization or a certain clinician.
Absolutely. Wow. It's just, I'm tearing up.
I know,
thinking about
me too.
What this really meant for us and other families facing this disease and the future generations,
So the in-person meeting, like you said, we have to talk about this, and it's because it was so incredibly unusual and unique. So like you said, it was open to the public, and I think we had close to 200 people there. Many were the clinicians that we mentioned, but I think you should share about who else came and what that experience was like standing at the podium, giving talks, mediating conversations, and looking out at the audience that was there.
Yeah, it was amazing. We had a group of alloimmunized mothers come to the conference, and not just the ones that were part of the subgroups, but just in the Allo Hope community came to discuss this and give their input, share their lived experiences and their expertise. And some of them actually brought their babies. Mm-hmm. It was the best part of the conference.
So cool. That was so cool.
So good. It was amazing. Like,
I mean,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I thought you were. I was okay. I mean, we even had many doctors come up to us after and say they've never been a part of something like this. We were making new guidelines with the moms and their babies in the room. We had doctors passing around HDFN babies.
I know.
While we all sat around conference tables. Just imagine a formal business conference plus babies.
But it's for the babies. That's why it was so fitting.
And it set the tone for the whole dynamic. It was so collaborative. Everybody was very grounded in why this was happening, you know?
Right. And it is a very hot topic, all of this. Mm-hmm. The transfusion, the trauma, and preventing alloimmunization. And so a lot of people have strong opinions. And so that made it even more impressive that we had useful conversations. We really worked together despite different opinions to come to a consensus on what's best moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so it was just really, it felt groundbreaking that the patients had such a big part in that discussion.
So the plan now is that these guidelines are going to be published split across 3 major manuscripts. One is for the trauma hematology piece, one is for MFM, pregnancy management, and one is for the neonatal management of HDFN. Mm-hmm. And they're in the final stages of publication right now. They're under review. So as soon as they're available, they will be in the show notes. If you don't see them now, just check back because we'll put them there as soon as we can.
Yeah, and they might already be out. If you're listening to this, they might be out.
Maybe.
That's very exciting.
And once they're live, the next step is making sure people know that they exist. Like, we got to be sharing it.
Okay, guys, I think we did it. We've talked about these guidelines and how they were created. And I think it would be fitting to wrap up again by reflecting on what is at stake. We've said it already. We've said it many times, but I want to repeat it one more time before we're done. Babies are still dying from HDFN. Not because we lack the tools to treat it, but because we haven't been using those tools consistently.
And now we can. Now we have standardized guidelines across these disciplines, and I think we have a responsibility to use them because the gaps in care aren't automatically filled simply because we have recommendations. They are filled when they are implemented.
So true. So our call to action for ourselves at Allo Hope and the entire community is read the guidelines, share them, bring the guidelines to your doctor, share them with your hospital, post online about them, implement them, advocate for them. And if you have questions or need support navigating any part of this, we are here for you. Please reach out. Always here for you.
And a special thank you again to Phil, Christine, Travis, all the clinicians who were involved with this effort, all of the supporting organizations who contributed to the conference for making this possible, and to the physicians, experts, care providers, sponsors who spent countless hours reviewing evidence, debating best practices, showing up in person, being a support, and the moms who flew across the country. Some left their children, some brought some little children to share their lived experience and their own personal expertise and their babies. Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys.
All right, and thank you for sticking with us through this ginormous episode.
Yes.
That was awesome.
It's amazing.
So I'll close us out.
Okay.
Whether you are a patient, provider, or otherwise affected by antibodies in pregnancy, we are here for you. We have great resources on our website at allohopefoundation.org. That's Allo, spelled A-L-L-O, hopefoundation.org.
Thanks for listening.
The Allo Podcast is offered by the Allo Hope Foundation, a nonprofit organization. This means that our ability to continue this work depends on corporate sponsorships, small research grants, and donations. While sponsorships and grants are vital, they're often restricted to specific activities, and they do not cover the everyday work that keeps our mission moving. Things like creating educational materials, writing grant applications, running our social media, and especially managing our rapidly growing patient support group where we counsel women every day. They also do not cover the direct support we provide to families who cannot access life-saving care, whether that's the cost of an antibody screen in Kenya or bus fare for a mom in the US who needs to travel for an intrauterine transfusion. If you've ever wondered whether a donation of any size makes an impact, it truly does. Please visit our show notes for information on how to donate to AHF or to become a recurring donor. Your support gives our small organization the stability we need to continue this work and ensure no family faces HDFN alone.
Let her cook.